Hi, welcome to ChatGPT for web developers. We're going to cover today, quickly, as a first look, how artificial intelligence and LLMs work for web developers. And we will talk about that later. So what's an LLM? So my name is Maximiliano Firtman. Let me go really quickly about myself. I'm from Argentina. I live in Buenos Aires, and I'm a web developer and also a mobile app developer. I'm actually excited, as most people around the world, about AI, and also a little scared. I'm between both worlds. I have authored many books, a lot of courses on different platforms, and of course the best one, Frontend Masters. You will find a lot of workshops and courses that I have been doing on mobile app development and also web development. But this is a different kind of workshop. It's a first look into a new technology for most of us. So we are here because of that, let me say, kind of ugly user interface. So you know that the ChatGPT user interface is not like, wow, but that's not what we see here. We see the power of something totally different behind scenes. So it's not about the UI. In fact, and this is not a course about ChatGPT. Actually, we won't be using ChatGPT. So ChatGPT, so chat.openai.com is not actually what we're going to cover today. We will see how can we use that as web developers. So I had that question a couple of months ago, as maybe some of you are having right now. Okay, I'm a mobile developer, I'm a web developer. I know that we have GPT. I mean, what's the point? Should I do something about that? Do I need to learn machine learning to actually use some of this stuff? Well, that's why I have created this course, to give you a quick look into ChatGPT from a perspective of a web developer. First, ChatGPT. What's that, in case you are here and you haven't heard about it? So it's a large language model designed to generate human-like responses to natural language input using the GPT architecture. So we have here natural language input. So when we talk to ChatGPT, we need to use natural language, our human natural language. So it's not a programming language. Another definition, ChatGPT is a computer program that can understand and respond to written text like a human could. So it's trying to impersonate us, actually. And the final definition, as if we were a child, that ChatGPT is like a talking robot that can talk with us by reading what we write and answering us in a way that sounds like a person talking. And actually, all these definitions are coming from ChatGPT itself. And that's kind of the goal of ChatGPT. Talk. So it's a talking parrot. Okay. I'm not going to get today, at least, into the details on how it works. We want to use it. We want to understand ChatGPT and use it. So this is not an artificial intelligence course in terms of we are not going to learn how to create a model like ChatGPT. We're going to use it. So we need to understand the concepts and use it in our favor. That's the idea. To use GPT LLMs, and I will explain what that is in a minute, in our own web apps. Today, we're going to do some code practices in JavaScript. So the only thing you need to know to follow this course is JavaScript and HTML. And on the server, we are also going to use JavaScript in a very simple Node.js Express service that we will provide to our frontend. I already have the frontend, so you don't need to create HTML and CSS. Today, we will focus specifically on ChatGPT. So I'm also not here to tell you that ChatGPT will replace all of us, okay? That's a different discussion for a different day. So we are going to use ChatGPT in our apps. So you will see how exciting it is to see all the opportunities that you have to enhance your web apps using the GPT APIs. So we will talk about that. We will talk about how, as a web developer, you can today start integrating ChatGPT in different ways. So we will talk about ChatGPT plugins, in case you are interested in that. We will talk about what happens with ChatGPT browsing the web, and not just ChatGPT, also Bing Chat. We will discuss the difference in a minute. They can browse the web, so they can browse our websites. So should we do something about that? Can we optimize the content for AI? Should we do that? Well, we will discuss that as well. But let's say that 80% of the workshop, 80% of this course, it's actually about coding apps that will talk to the, for now, let's say ChatGPT API. Then we will become more specific with the terms. Okay, so we will cover OpenAI and ChatGPT. We will try to understand the whole ecosystem that we have today. And you probably know this, but AI is changing really fast. So everything that I'm saying today may be a little bit outdated in a couple of months, or not even telling you years. So that's why you need to rush here and actually start working with this, because everything is changing. So the ecosystem will probably change after a while. Then we will get into concepts that won't change so fast. I'm talking about how we can use these tools with web development. We will talk a little bit about a concept known as prompt engineering that I will give you a spoiler. I don't like the term, and I will explain why later. But anyway, it's a term that is there, and it's something important that we need to understand. And at the end, we will talk about embeddings and fine-tuning. So we'll see what is that in case you want to, let's say for now, customize ChatGPT with your own data. That's the idea. We're going to talk about ChatGPT. ChatGPT is actually a web app, right? It's a web app that it's based on, or is using, something known as a GPT model. GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. Okay, what's that? Well, that's actually one specific model of a set of models known as large language models, LLMs. So every time we see LLMs, we are talking about large language models. So these are AI models that were trained for natural language processing. The idea is they were trained with text, but trillions of text. So, and they know how text work. Again, I'm not going to explain here how these models work, but the basic idea to take this for really something really basic. Think about when you have a smart keyboard on your phone, that it's we have a prediction of the next word. I mean, you're typing hello, how, and your phone will say R. It will appear as a recommendation, as a suggestion, and then you, how are you? Because that's the most probably two words that comes after hello, how. LLMs are kind of that with a million asteroids. That's kind of the idea. So LLMs knows statistically which words comes after other words. That's kind of the idea. That's the whole idea behind this. The problem is that, not the problem, the situation is that we, the community, even the developers, the scientists working with GPT, they realize that it's not just words, that at one point it feels like behind the scenes there is some kind of reasoning. I'm not going to discuss here if it's true or not, but we feel when we talk with ChatGPT that sometimes it feels it's reasoning. So there is, I don't want to say intelligence, but we have some sparks of something. And that's why everyone is excited today about LLMs and ChatGPT. And by the way, we have LLMs today in the market from other companies as well. We have Llama from Meta. We have from Google we have Lambda. That's the one that we don't see. It's an internal. But then we have Google Bard, that is a product using Lambda. And many others are appearing from other companies as well. But ChatGPT, it was like the first public one, the first one that was available to the public. and it seems to be still be the best one out there. So LLMs are actually part of the deep learning umbrella, and the deep learning umbrella is part of the machine learning umbrella that is actually what we typically say, or typically known today as AI or artificial intelligence. Just to mention different concepts and how they apply here. So AI, we have one kind of AI known as machine learning, and there is one kind of machine learning known as deep learning, and within deep learning we have LLMs, and we have GPTs, and then we have ChatGPT as one product of that. And ChatGPT is actually a product, a website, an app from a company known as OpenAI. OpenAI is not really open these days, at least. It's a company behind ChatGPT, and it's not the only product they have. They have other things. For example, if you have heard about DALL-E, this was also one of the first public artificial intelligence image generator. In this case, DALL-E is not an LLM. It's a different kind of machine learning model. And OpenAI is also offering to the community, development community and app community, APIs. And we will focus there actually, not really over ChatGPT, but on APIs. APIs that are also using GPT. So they're using the same GPT model as ChatGPT. So when you go to ChatGPT, you're using a GPT model. And we are going to use an API from the same company that is also using the GPT model. So that's how we are going to connect to ChatGPT most of the time. And just to finish that empty part of the slide that we have there, OpenAI has partnered with Microsoft. So Microsoft is not owning OpenAI, but there is a really strong partnership between both companies. And Microsoft is also offering Bing Chat that is now integrated in many places on Bing.com, but also on Microsoft Edge as a tab. And also Microsoft is integrating LLMs in many softwares such as Office or Visual Studio. And Microsoft is also offering Azure OpenAI APIs. So if you're used to Microsoft APIs on Azure, you can also use GPT, so the same source, the same model as ChatGPT, but using the Microsoft infrastructure and using the Microsoft business contract over there. Today, we will be focusing here. So we are going to mostly use APIs that are using the GPT model from OpenAI. That is the same model that is using ChatGPT. Make sense? That's kind of the idea. That's the architecture. So that's where we're going to focus. Azure OpenAI APIs are also the same thing. So if you learn how to use directly API from OpenAI, you can move to Azure at any time. But as we are doing this video, Azure OpenAI APIs are still in beta and closed, so you need to apply to get access to them. So we're going to use the one from OpenAI that they are open to everyone. Also, we will talk a little bit about something on top of ChatGPT. It's known as plugins. Plugins for ChatGPT are also something that is not yet available to every user. But it's another way that we have as web developers or as service providers or content providers to integrate into ChatGPT, into the ChatGPT ecosystem. So large language models can be used for several tasks without changing or training models. So before LLMs were actually so popular, in the deep learning environment, we had to select one particular model that we need for something in particular. We wanna categorize products. Well, we had a model for that. We wanna translate. We had a model for that. And most of the time, we were able to train our own models. Okay, that's part of deep learning. But now we realize that we can use LLMs, such as GPT, for a lot of tasks without the need to change the model or to train any model. That's why everyone is excited about LLMs. We found that it's very useful for a lot of tasks. ChatGPT works in this way. ChatGPT is in the middle, is that logo we have there. ChatGPT, or any GPT model actually, receives a prompt and it gives a result. That's kind of the idea. And in this case, ChatGPT, as an app, is using a GPT model that looks like a black box there. And the color is not random, because it's actually a black box. We don't know what's inside. We don't know how it works. We will see this in action in a couple of minutes, but we treat that piece of software, let's say it's a software, as something that we don't actually understand what's inside. The only thing we know is that we put a prompt and we receive something in return. Okay, what's a prompt? A string, just text. What's the result? A string, another text. That's why it's known as a large language model. So that's the basic thing. And maybe if you're a developer, you're expecting this to be different later during the day in this course. Like you're expecting me to show you an API where you can actually get into that black box to make things differently or things like that, and that doesn't exist. Actually, that doesn't exist. So I got that as a surprise when I was trying to understand how this works. So GPT, we have different versions of GPT, and there will be more versions in the future. That's the only thing that you pick, like the version. And there are some settings as well, but we don't have an API for do something different with the model. It's always a prompt and the result. That's all. So we need to deal with that. That's why there is something known as prompt engineering, because the only input we have there is the prompt. So we need to get experts into creating that prompt. Well, when we are setting a prompt, or when we are sending a prompt to ChatGPT or to any API that is GPT enabled, and we're getting the result, we are measuring those strings with something known as tokens. Tokens will be the most important unit for us from now on. Why? Because that's what we are paying for. A token is a sequence of characters, or let's say sub-words, that the model uses as the basic unit of processing and understanding natural language text. So we are not going to be charged in our credit card. We will get into that in a couple of minutes. We are not going to get charged by the character or by the word or by the paragraph. We're going to get charged by the token. So that's how we work. So during the month, OpenAI will count how many tokens we've used, and we use tokens when we prompt and when we receive the output. Okay? Yeah, you actually are in charge of the prompt, not of the output. But what you can do is to select the maximum amount of token that you are willing to pay for every prompt. So you will say, hey, I'm going to pay for only 10 tokens, not more than that. So we can narrow the output using that maximum tokens property that we will see where it is in a minute. And just to give you an idea of what a token is, in English, it's roughly 4.5, so between 3 and 6 letters per token. So one token, let's say it's 4 letters. But that's different per language. And also that's different when you're applying source code. So because ChatGPT or GPT can also read and write source code. So in that case, it's not per character. For example, when you open curly braces, that might be just one token. So it's not counting really characters. And when you're writing in different languages, Chinese, Korean, it's not like 4 characters will give you a token. So it's a different way of understanding that. At this point, you might be thinking, how do I know how this works? Well, we do have in OpenAI a tokenizer tool. It's platform.openai.com/tokenizer, where you can write some text and you can see how many tokens this particular text will get. In this case, it's going to be 3 tokens. But I can just copy any text and see how many tokens it will take. You will see that it's not always the same. For example, here I have 1 comma the comma is taking 1 token just for the comma. Okay? But at least with this, you can estimate based on the prompts that you will use and the results that you are expecting. You will try to understand roughly or to estimate roughly how this is going to work. By the way, here we see GPT-3. GPT, we know what that is. It's the LLM model. What about Codex? Codex is a different model that OpenAI, the company, is going to deprecate pretty soon. And Codex was actually optimized for source code. But because now GPT is pretty good at source code as well, they are deprecating Codex. But it was a different model. So different models will calculate tokens in a different way. So that's about tokens. But what about the price of tokens? Of course, pricing might change. So I'm just giving you the rough price as we are shooting this video. There is a pricing website at OpenAI where you can get the exact pricing. But just to give you an idea, ChatGPT or GPT 3.5, that's actually the version that ChatGPT is using, cost around $2 per million tokens. Okay? Yeah, you won't pay per million tokens. You will pay by the token. So if it's 1 cent, you will be charged 1 cent. But that's actually the price. So GPT-4, that is the latest version of the model available, that you might have heard that is actually much better for some special tasks such as coding, and complex tasks. It's actually 30 to 60 times more expensive than 3.5. So that power comes with more processing power used, so that's why it's more expensive. The advantage is that it has a higher token window. You say, okay, what's that? What's a token window? So now we know what a token is. And we know that we will prompt a model and the model will respond with a string, okay? We know that. So, and we know that that's expressed in tokens. What we don't know as of right now is that models have a limit of how many tokens you can input, you can prompt, or receive. And GPT-4 it has a higher token window. The window is known as, like, if I want to send GPT a book, because I want GPT to summarize the book, I need to calculate how many tokens that book will contain. And GPT-3 can maybe read 1 page per request, only 1 page. But ChatGPT-4 can read 60 pages, 80 pages of that same book. Of course, I will pay more, not just because the token is more expensive, but because, of course, I'm paying per token. So, but having that higher token window means that I can give more context to that LLM black box to get better answers. That's the idea. Also, GPT-4 will have, in the near future, it's not today available to every user, image and prompting. That is the idea of taking a picture and ask questions about the picture. So I can take a picture of the room here, and I can get an answer of, okay, how many chairs do I have here in this room, or ask questions about that picture. That API was demoed by the CEO, but it's not yet available to everyone. When that happens, it will have its own pricing system. Also, there are other models available on OpenAI that we won't use today, but have in mind, it's not everything ChatGPT. There are other models. The most common one is called DaVinci. Those models are not optimized for chat, for a conversation between a human and the LLM. It was more about completion. So you were actually saying, I'm a web developer, and because of that, my primary language is, and the model will give you JavaScript, probably, right? But it's not about answering questions, more completion. It's like the grandfather of ChatGPT. Those models are still there, and you can still use them, and sometimes they are cheaper than ChatGPT if you want to use them. But they are for more precise, specific situations. And we know that LLMs can be used for anything. So most people are just using ChatGPT. Also, we have image models. And later today, we will use one. That's DALL-E, actually. So you can actually send a prompt. That's not an LLM. It's a different model. You will send a prompt, like I want a web developer that is actually thinking about an artificial intelligence. And you will get an image that was created based on your prompt. And for everything, we have an API. And we will use that API from our web app. And finally, there is audio models. We have that audio model from OpenAI is open source. But if you don't want to download and run that directly in your computer, you can use the service. In that case, the audio service they have is for transcription. So we can get the audio of what I'm speaking right now. We can get really quickly, like in 3 hours of audio, you can get the text transcript that it works pretty well in around 5 seconds. That's how quickly it is. So 3 hours in 5 seconds. So those are the models that we have today at OpenAI. What about how to create an account on OpenAI? First, it's not the same as having an account on ChatGPT. So you need to go and create a different account. You go to platform.openai.com. It's free to sign in. There is only one restriction, is that you need to validate your phone number. So you need a valid phone number with an SMS, and that phone number shouldn't be like a VoIP phone number. So it's not going to work if you try a VoIP, like an online number such as a Skype or things like that. It's not going to work. It should be a real SIM card. And you will get, if this is the first time you will try this, and you can do that right now, you can pause the video and do that right now. If you sign in, you can get free credits. Today it's $5 that will last 3 months. And in that case, you can start playing with the API and do all the exercises that we will be using today, not paying a dime. So $5 will be good enough for everything that we will be doing today and more. If you are thinking, oh, I will create different accounts so I can get more than $5, those $5 is per phone number. Okay, that's why they're not accepting VoIP numbers. There will be rate limits as well. This is in case you are getting really professional or your service is going viral. There are some rate limits, so you cannot get into one particular API more than 500 times per minute. For example, GPT 3.5, so that's ChatGPT, the cheaper version, it's 3,500 requests per minute. It's actually pretty good, for a start at least. It depends on what you're doing. Have in mind that you have that limit per account. And GPT-4, it's only 200 requests per minute. So it's more expensive, it's much better, but also it's much limited today, at least. So this is important for those of you that are working for a company or creating products for companies. When you're using the OpenAI API, all the interaction that you are having will not be used for training or improving models at OpenAI company. That's not the case for ChatGPT. When you're using ChatGPT, even if you're paying for the Plus service, the data that you are submitting might be used later for training. When you're using the API, that's not the case. It's part of the contract. Okay? So legally, everything that you say there is not going to be stored or used to train other models. So this is important, and if you're a ChatGPT user, you probably know this. OpenAI GPT, both 3.5 and 4, the training data is actually up to 2021. So they might not have knowledge of current events. So you shouldn't rely on OpenAI for events in the past 2 years. So have in mind that. That was the basic of OpenAI and understanding how that works. So at this point, the next step for you is to go and get an account, because without an account, you won't be able to use this. We are web developers, right? So we mentioned that. So what's the relationship between OpenAI, ChatGPT, and web development? So this is what we can do as web developers. First, integration. We can use artificial intelligence for your apps. We can integrate that in your app for many things. We can create, we can transfer and manipulate data, conversations, we can create chatbots, and there are many other ideas that I will show you in a minute. That's one thing that we can do, and we will focus on that today. You can create plugins. In this case, plugins from ChatGPT. For example, we can create the Frontend Masters plugin, so you can ask ChatGPT about in which course from Frontend Masters I can learn about web push. And then ChatGPT will talk to the web service that we can create here in Frontend Masters, and it will respond with the data that then ChatGPT will process, understand, and create the output. That's a plugin. We can also use GPT for content creation. That's a different, it's more around marketing and SEO. We're not going to really cover that today. And there is also some questions today, and some of you may be wondering, we do have SEO, right? Search engine optimization. Well, do we need an AIO, artificial intelligence optimization? Because now AI can read web content. Bing can read, the Bing version of GPT can browse the website. And now there is a plugin for ChatGPT that can also browse the website. That plugin is still not available to everyone, but it will in short time. So do we need to prepare or do something to serve better our AI? Well, we'll see. The quick answer is no. We don't need to do anything in particular. However, there are still some people working with that and let's say playing with that to see what they can achieve. So let's talk a little bit about some ideas. Okay, ideas that you can start thinking about. So what things we can do as web developers? You can use GPT for user input detection, such as hate speech, content that you don't want in your system. So you can pass user input to ChatGPT and ask for something in return. And that something can be categorize this content in these possible options. And then you can automatically reject that or not within your system. Content creation, you can create content on the fly. Sentiment analysis, for example, you have a review system and you can send, the user is sending you a review of any of your services or products. You can send the text to ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to give you just one answer. Is this positive or negative? And based on that, you can change the message that you reply to that user automatically. And if it's negative, for example, you can send an email to someone so that someone can reach the customer for blah, blah, blah. Make sense? So that's one idea. You can customize or make articles or content really personal. For example, maybe a newspaper. You have a newspaper, of course, a journalist, or maybe ChatGPT, someone wrote an article. It's published. But maybe I don't understand it. So I can ask the website with maybe a drop-down option for a simpler version, or a summary, or a version as if I'm 10 years old, or a different language, or whatever. And you can then customize that text and offer a service to your readers. So, and then can improve the time on your page, and then you have more ads and more views and maybe more money. Language translation is actually pretty good. It's better than Google Translate, translating to languages, even to languages that are not even common. Like, I don't know, Guarani, that's from Paraguay, that on Google Translate is not available or not good enough. Search, You can use it for a search box, and you can use ChatGPT to find the content within your database or within your articles for that, and we will explain how that's done later. To summarize content, GPT is pretty good on that. Q&A, it can create the Q&A for you. Test automation, now talking about code, it can actually write your tests directly. Chatbots, that's like the first step when we are dealing with GPT. Let's create a chatbot. So then it can offer like customer service to your users. You should use ethics here and say to the user, hey, this is AI, have in mind that. And there's more. Email generation, content filtering, content tagging. This is pretty cool. So you have an article, you can tag the article. So then it's better to connect articles between them instead of doing this manually. You can automate social media. So you can post on Twitter, on Instagram automatically when something happens on your page, and make that content doesn't like look automatic, like it's always the same text. It's not a template. ChatGPT can generate different versions of that. Keyword research for SEO, spelling and grammar errors, so text correction. That's pretty cool on that. Content enhancement, maybe you have a lot of articles without images. Now you can create images around that. Content creation, email filtering, or even automatic transcriptions on videos. There are more ideas. This is just a list of ideas of what you can do as a web developer with AI. And by the way, this is not ideas of integrating your app, like make an AI app for something. You can make an app that uses AI as part of the business. So in this case, we were just talking about ideas for any website, but you can create an app that can translate JavaScript into something else, or any language into JavaScript. So in that case, you use AI as the core of your business. We can use other specific artificial intelligence models in our apps and website. But what makes LLMs easier is that they're multi-purpose. So then we don't need to train a new model. We don't need to create a new API. We don't need to do anything. We just set up in our app, server side, client side. We will see later what's better. But we can just have one code base to talk to LLMs for all the purposes. We don't need to set up different models for that. That's the great advantage of LLMs. Another thing that we can do, or we can start thinking about as web developers, is plugins for ChatGPT, and potentially for other LLMs or such as Bing Chat in the future. So this is a new feature to ChatGPT. It's not yet available for everyone. In fact, in my account, I don't yet have access to it, but I know how that works from a development point of view. And the idea is that the user can pick from a list of plugins that you can install from a marketplace at any time when you're making a query in the ChatGPT website. And then ChatGPT will use those plugins for enhancing the answer. I will explain how that works in a minute. So it's not like ChatGPT will know all the time all the plugins. The user will install plugins, and then the user will pick at any particular moment, hey, for the query that I'm going to do right now, I want you to use those plugins if you feel, ChatGPT, that will be useful. That's the idea. And plugins are basically web services. Going back to the idea that I mentioned before, we can make a plugin from Frontend master videos. So then we need to create first a web service that will expose the endpoints to ChatGPT that with information that is useful for whatever we think that ChatGPT can use our data for. We need to create a JSON manifest and register that manifest with ChatGPT. I will show you a sample of that manifest in a minute. And also, if you want, you can require authentication from users to the system, because that plugin can actually read, for example, your emails. It doesn't need to be like a public API. It can also have an authentication token that goes to that user. And maybe you want to charge for that. So it needs to be a premium user. How does it work? So we are developers. When we think about plugins, we think that there is an API where we can hook our web services or something like that, and then the GPT model will know that our service is doing something and it will work. But actually, it's much more simple, and I could say sometimes even silly than that. This is how it works. So the user is in ChatGPT, and the user added your plugin to their system from the marketplace, and ChatGPT will have the list of plugins enabled. And every plugin has a text that you define explaining what kind of data is available in that plugin. ChatGPT uses GPT to actually ask the model if, for the user's question, it seems likely that that plugin is useful. So let's say that I'm asking, I want to know where I can find information about PHP in Frontend Masters. So then ChatGPT will send to the model a question. Do you feel like any of these plugins will enhance the answer? And the model will say, yeah, the Frontend Master plugin can do that. Then ChatGPT will go, it will call our service, and it will enhance the prompt. How is it going to enhance the prompt? It will copy and paste the response from the web service into the prompt. So if it feels weird, we will do something similar, so no worries. The thing, what I'm telling you here is that if we are making a web service for a ChatGPT plugin, the information that we provide from the service will finally end up within the prompt as text, okay, as context for the prompt. It's not really a plugin into the GPT model. We are just hacking the prompt with the data from our plugin. That's how it works. It's kind of weird. So the plugin is a JSON file that you must store in your well-known folder. It's a JSON file with metadata. And here you will see that there is a name for human, a name for model, a description for human, and a description for model. So the description for human is for the marketplace. So the human can check or uncheck that plugin. But the most important one is description for the model, because this description is the one that is going to be used to determine if that plugin is useful or not for the current query. Does it make sense? It's a little hacky. And where do you define your endpoints and the data structure of your web services? In a YAML file. So we have a JSON file and also a YAML file. The YAML file looks like this, where you set the URL of the endpoint, and then it's like a web service description. That you have a GET. The GET has a summary, the possible responses, the structure, the schema of the answer that you will provide. You can even ask ChatGPT to make this file for you. Have in mind that plugins are not just for reading information. They can also be for acting. So you can add things to your database based on a ChatGPT response. It's not just to receive data. It's the main purpose, but not the only purpose. So let me show you quickly how plugins work. For that, I will show you a video. Just to understand, in case you haven't seen this, how a plugin will work from a user's perspective. So you see, let me mute the guy here. But actually, what you have is a selector for the model that we have today, and there is a model for using plugins. And then you enable the plugins that you want to use for this particular query. You go to the store, you install plugins, and then on each query, you can enable or disable plugins. And again, the first step will be for the model to see if the plugins enabled, these three, are suitable for this prompt. The same GPT model will say, I think that maybe this one is useful. So if the prompt makes that decision, then it will act and open that web service. It will call the web service, and it will inject the response in the prompt. So that's how a plugin works. So you're not actually hooking into the model. You are hooking into the prompt. You are hacking the prompt, the string that goes to the model. So that's how you need to think about creating plugins. So if you are if you're a source of information, then maybe it's a good idea to start thinking about creating a plugin. And if you want to create a plugin, you can apply today for a waitlist for developers. In that case, you explain what your plugin is for, why is it useful, and if you get access to it, you can start playing and trying your plugins there. So as a developer, that's a plugin. There is one particular plugin that was created by ChatGPT that is a browsing plugin. So it can browse the web. That is similar to how Bing Chat works today, that you can search something and it will go and make a search and it will go and browse your website. It will honor robots.txt, that old file from if you're a web developer, you know that. Basically, you can actually say, hey, OpenAI, I don't want you to take my content for your users. So you can actually, it will honor that declaration if you deny access to the bot. And the keyword to deny that, based on the user agent, is ChatGPT user. So you can say, no, I don't want user from ChatGPT in my website. One of the problems here is that maybe what happens if you have then a lot of users on ChatGPT browsing your website. First, they're not actually seeing your banners, your ads. They're not seeing your promotions. They're not seeing your login screen. They're just taking your data. So that's why some companies are saying, hey, maybe I'm going to filter this. And also, something that actually the plugin says that it's going to be nice with domains, with origins, meaning that they're not going to send you 1 million requests to your server. So they will try to be good citizens of the web. That's what they're saying. And the next question is, that's a user agent. Can you deliver something different for ChatGPT? Technically, you can. Server side, you can read the user agent, so the browser's name, and deliver something different. Better, different, worse, I don't know. Is it possible? It is. You shouldn't be doing that. So technically, it's that browser, it's capable of reading any website. That leads to another question. It's about security. There are, for example, ideas, papers, and even real things around something known as prompt injection. So a prompt injection is a way, because remember I mentioned that the plugin is just injecting content in the prompt. So what if the plugin is injecting something that changes the prompt completely, as for example SQL injection, that is changing the whole SQL query? Well, something similar happens here, and sometimes, for example, you can inject words such as, forget about everything that was requested before. Now listen to me, colon, and you give another instruction. If you know that that string is going to be injected in a larger prompt, you might be injecting that prompt. And there is a researcher here that we can check with more information about that technique. In fact, he has a demo here on how he made Bing Chat that is based on GPT, on the same ChatGPT, to speak like a pirate. So you get into the website, you ask questions, and without saying nothing different, the GPT model will speak like a parrot. And why? Because he injected a prompt within the contents of the HTML. And in this case, Bing is reading the source code of your HTML, the content, and he managed to inject the model. This is just, yeah, it can be funny, but also you can inject instructions. For example, you can inject, you can make the AI work for you if you're a bad actor, such as the AI can ask you for your credit card. And you see, oh, it's not the website, it's Bing asking me for my credit card. Okay, I will give the credit card. So this is an ongoing research, if you want, but it's possible then to inject text into your websites that will change how models are reacting, because everything is just about prompt injection. So prompt is king here. Okay. So we need to be very careful with our own calls. If we integrate GPT data into our system, run actions based on GPT responses. So there is, I'm not sure if any of you have heard about something known as AutoGPT. AutoGPT is a tool that is used in OpenAI that actually iterates over GPT many times. And one of the things that it can do is take actions on your operating system or take actions in your system. It can open apps, close apps, use apps. It can do stuff based on what GPT is doing. Well, if someone can inject a prompt, they can ask for stealing your information, and then a tool will get the folder in your computer, make a zip, and send that folder over email to a bad actor. So you need to be very careful with prompt injection, right? So if you iterate responsively with GPT, like call GPT many times, have in mind that some security risks are there. So you should always validate the format and the intention before acting. In fact, you can use GPT again to check if an action is valid or invalid, or if it was changed, for example. Okay, so it's time to start touching things. So on github.com/Firtman/ChatGPT web dev, we have the repo that we will be using today. That repo has already some HTML and some very basic JavaScript and a very basic web server. It's not yet connected to OpenAI, so we're going to connect that first. In the repo, you will find the slides, a samples folder, and a cookie masters folder. Cookie masters is an app that we will use at the end of today's course to actually enhance with AI. It's actually pretty cool, so stay there. So you will see how we can actually use artificial intelligence to provide directly something cool, such as, for example, a recipe and images from that recipe from ingredients that you have at home. But that's for later. We are going to start working with the samples folder. So I will just open that folder directly, so it's my root. So I open the folder, and we have on package.json the list of dependencies. We are just going to use Express.js, Course for making the API available cross-domain, and OpenAI. That's a specific library that will make our life easier when we are talking with OpenAI. Then we have a server that you can see that is pretty empty. It's a very basic Express.js server. If you don't have experience with this, you can just go to the Frontend Masters library and get one of the Node.js basic courses. Anyway, it's pretty simple what we're going to create. We have a public folder that we are serving, and then we have some endpoints already set up that are empty. /API chat, API general, API image, and API recipe. They are completely empty. Within the public folder, we have two sections, the chat and the playground. So they both have HTML, CSS, and pretty basic JavaScript, so nothing really, really fancy. To start the server, I'm going to open a terminal and run npm start. And it's not working because I need to run npm install first to install my dependencies. After the dependencies are ready, we can start the server. And now localhost 3000 will open my server. So I'm going to localhost 3000. It says 404 because we can get into /chat. And this is a very basic interface to create a chat clone. So we are going to create our own version of ChatGPT just to understand how the API works. So the first thing that we need to do, if you look at our code, in the public folder, we do have a GPT.js file. That file has a very basic fetch system, so it's just a fetch call that will make an HTTP request. And within, for example, chat app.js, we have an OpenAI key. So let's start talking about that. So what's the key? If you have ever played with web services, with third-party web services, you probably know what the key is. Don't worry about the security. If you know what the key is, I have already deleted these keys, and I'm going to delete all the keys that you will see on the screen right now. Because what's the problem with the key? The key is actually your authorization token. The key is anyone with that key can actually charge your credit card for using OpenAI. Where can you get those keys? Well, after you have your account at OpenAI, and at this point you should have already your personal account at OpenAI. You go to platform.openai.com, and there is a section for API keys. There you will see all the API keys that you have already created, and this is important. If you cannot see the keys that you have. You can see the name of the key, a part of the key, and when you have created and last used it. Let me show you what that means. I can create a new secret key now. I can say this is the Frontend Masters Workshop. Create secret key. And that's the key. I must copy and save the key right now. If I close this window, I will just never have access to that key anymore. I can still delete that in the future. So I will copy that key and paste that key here. Let's make sure that we don't have a piece from a previous key. So that key that you see in the screen is actually pointing to my account. Anyone with that key, again, because this is important, anyone with that key will use your account and it will be charged to your credit card. So you should save that really, really in a safe way. Now you know the importance of that key. So you need to safely store that key. Anyway, I'm in a JavaScript file that is pointing from an HTML file. That is not safe. So that's why typically we're not going to make calls in the front end to the OpenAI API. We can, and we're going to do the first example as with this, just with the front end, but that's not a good idea. It's not really not a good idea. So that means that you will always need a server, at least to make some kind of a proxy between your front end and the OpenAI server. So once you have the key, by the way, remember that here you can say done, and then your key is there. In the future, if you know that someone has stolen your key, well, you can just go and delete that. And by the way, I can just refresh and see if someone is using it, and if it says never, it's still unused. So we are safe. So anyway, you go and revoke the key. In fact, if OpenAI, I think somewhere it says that if OpenAI thinks that your key appeared somewhere, so it's a public, it's on a GitHub repo, it will delete the key. It will remove the key. And once the key is removed, it's not going to work, and it's not going to charge anyone. Okay, so once you have the key, we are ready to make queries. But before doing that, the place where you will live the most initially is the playground. That's a nice name. If we want to live in a playground, it's not so bad. So the playground is where we can test, we can try our prompts and how they look like before actually copy and pasting that prompt within our app. The playground has different models and different modes. And the mode that we want, because remember that we are not going to use all the models that are available at OpenAI. Here you can see we have DaVinci, Curie, Babbage, Ada. There are different models for different things. We're going to use ChatGPT. And that model is not in this mode. It's actually in the chat mode. So the first step is to go to the chat mode. And now we can pick the model, GPT 3.5 or GPT 4, the expensive one. And now that you are here, you can see three sections: system, user, and add message. This is kind of a ChatGPT interface that looks better. In fact, if you're paying for ChatGPT Plus, you have a trick. Maybe you can stop paying those $15 US per month and just pay for the API and use the playground, because it has the same functionality, and you can use GPT-4 without the cap that you have on GPT Plus. And you have even more things to try. We'll talk about this, temperature and all that stuff. So for example, here you can express who is the system. We can define a role for GPT. So you can say, okay, you are, let's say, a professor explaining web development. You are funny, and you are always looking for explaining things. So you are defining the role as if it's an actor or an actress. I don't know the gender of GPT. And then I can enter a message here. And what is a message? This is the user, so this is us, okay? Humans. Human user. So I can say, hello, how are you? Okay, and I can submit. This is like ChatGPT. Hello, I'm just a computer program, so I don't have feelings, blah, 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 blah. So I think that's probably the funny part, right? Anyway. So, and I can add more messages. And of course, I can have the full conversation that you're used to on ChatGPT, but in this case, it's being charged by the token, okay? It's charged by the token, not by month. One of the things that we can set up here, we have a couple of settings. For example, maximum length. In this case, we can say, for example, you know what? I only want, the minimum is 4 tokens. So I want your answer in 4 tokens. Remember, a token is roughly like 4 characters in English. So if I say, I don't know, what's your name? Submit. The answer, I'm a language. That's all. Okay, because we are stopping that answer. Of course, you can say, well, it's not useful because I was expecting like something that fits there. Well, I need to be precise with what I'm asking. So what's your name? Answer in just 1 or 2 words. Okay, so I can actually say that. Oops, sorry about, let's add a message here. Maybe that will probably be better. I'm an OpenAI. So that's better, because I was clear about my intentions. And that's key. That's key. Anyway, so that's length. Typically 4 is, but you can see that the maximum is 2048 on GPT 3.5. If we move to GPT 4, we can actually get more, but not in the playground. We can get 4,000 or 8,000, but not in the playground because I don't know why. But from JavaScript, you don't have that limitation. Let's say there are more properties here, such as this. Top P, frequency penalty. You have an explanation here. Typically, changing that is really fine graded. The most important thing here is temperature. That's the most important part. Really important. Why? The temperature is a value between 0 and 1. Do you remember that we mentioned that ChatGPT works like the prediction at the keyboard? So it predicts the next word. So if you say, again, hello, how are, the most common possible next word is you. If we say 0, the model will always pick the most probable next word. So it will be you. So we are making the model predictable just by setting temperature as 0. When you are saying 1, we are like making more random selections. So it's not going to take always the most probable. Also maybe the one that comes after, or after, or after, or after. And that's how you make the model more imaginative, more fancy, that can say anything, can hallucinate more. Because when it's picking the words, it's not always picking the most probable word. But typically as developers, unless you are creating, I don't know, stories for kids, jokes, or things like that, as app developers, we prefer predictable answers. So if I am asking one question, I typically prefer the same answer always, right? So most of the time, as developers, we probably want the temperature to be 0 or close to 0. Again, unless you are writing emails or social posts where, yeah, you want more imagination in the answer. Make sense? So typically, that's something that you will touch. So now I will go to API reference. In API reference, you can, of course, see things that you can do with different APIs. Because we are going to work with ChatGPT, we are looking for chat, not completions. Completions is for using other models within OpenAI. So within chat, you can see how that works. So basically, to talk to the API, we need to make a post request to that endpoint. And within the headers, we have a header for authentication where we're going to send the API key. That's how OpenAI will know who we are, so it can charge the tokens to us. So and here we can see the example in curl, so we can copy and paste this into the console. We just need to paste the OpenAI key. But also you can click here and select Python or Node.js. And you can see the code ready for copy and paste on Python or Node.js. Why not JavaScript client side? Because as I mentioned before, it's a bad idea. But anyway, we will try it right now. So if we try that version, let me paste that directly here in a text format. I'm just going to copy and paste the OpenAI key and paste it here where it says the key. So I want you to see this part. It's a JSON that we are sending through post to OpenAI's servers. It has some properties. For example, we are selecting which model do we want. 3.5, that's the cheapest ChatGPT model. It's called GPT 3.5 Turbo. That's the name. If you want GPT-4, it's just GPT-4, the expensive one. Let's stay with 3.5 Turbo because we are not going to make too complex queries. And then look at this. We need to send messages because we are talking to chat. Messages is always an array. And we need to pass objects with role and content, role, content, role, content. For example, remember that within the playground, we had a system message where we were explaining who you are, who the system is. If we want that, it's something that we pass in the array. It's role system. That's the name. And we pass a content. And we say you are. I don't need to close this here, like there. You are a computer answering questions. It's not mandatory, right? So it's optional. But this is just giving more context to the model to make a better answer. So this is role user. So the user is saying, hi, do you know what to do in Minneapolis on Saturday? Question mark. That's the prompt. Okay? So if we copy and paste this into a terminal, and we have the answer. The answer says we have the answer. I mean, it's a JSON here. In fact, let's try to get this JSON answer into VS Code so we can look it better. We can format it. So this is the answer that we received from the OpenAI server. It says the model that it's using is GPT 3.5 Turbo version 0301. How many tokens we use for the prompt, and how many tokens we use for completion? In total, 130 tokens. It was $2 per million. Well, do the math. It's still pretty cheap, okay, in that interaction. And then we receive an array of choices where you have a message saying the assistant is the model, answer with hello. There are many things you can do in Minneapolis on Saturday. Here are the few recommendations. 1, visit the iconic sculpture garden at the blah, 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 blah. So that's the basics of how we deal with this. So now we need to just mix this into our app.js folder for the chat. Because remember, we were trying, it's not here, it's here. We were trying to do this. So I want to say hello, send, and I want to see that in the UI. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So to do that, let's open within the chat folder the app.js file. And there is a function send chat that is already reading the prompt from the user in a variable, and there is a to-do here. So we actually need to make a query. Remember, let's say warning. We are doing this client side with a big security risk, just for fun. In fact, this is pretty good if you want to do an interface locally in your computer that is playing with GPT, but don't publish this with the key. Okay? We will do it better on the next example. So we need to make a fetch. So we need to create a response object that will await for a fetch API. The endpoint that we want, by the way, I do have it here as well, the fetch function, but I'm going to do it from scratch. The endpoint is this one. That's the URL. Okay, makes sense? And then we need to pass some arguments. In fact, I think that they were already here. I can just for the sake of doing this faster. Don't want to waste too much of your time. So that's the endpoint, and then I need to pass an object where we say the method is post, so I want to send the post, and though this is the header and the body. We don't have that data yet. We need to create it, so we will do it in a minute. So for the headers, if we look at this version, it's not just the content type. We also need to pass authorization, bearer, and the key. So I need to also add that, because if not, it's not going to work. So it's authorization, that's the name of the property, and it's that, and we can use backtick here and use the OpenAI key there with all the warnings that I gave you about doing this on Frontend. Okay, makes sense? So what about the data? I need to create that data object. So I need to create a data object that actually matches what we saw here. It's not so complicated. It's just that object, so I can copy and paste that object. It's the model and an array of messages. I can pass the system message or not. It's one system message per query. Okay? And instead of, hi, do you know what to do in Minneapolis? I need to take what is coming as the prompt that the user typed in our form control. Okay? Like so. So we have the prompt, and that's the array. And then we wait for the response. And because it's a JSON response, a JSON response needs to be parsed as JSON. So we are going to say response.json, and we are going to await for that response. Let's call that JSON, and let's do a console log to see if that works. Does it make sense? So we're just making the same request, but from here. So I'm going to open the console to have that at hand and say, hi, send, and we receive the answer. So the object is there. Now we need to dig into this object and get into choices, sub0, dot message, dot content. That's the actual message. So we actually need to get that. So we'll create the message from the let's say computer, from GPT is the object. So JSON.choices sub0, let's go again here, choices sub0 dot message dot content. And now what I need to do is to put that, to attach that into my HTML. So we can go quickly to the HTML and see that we have a UL. So it's a list, so we're going to add list items pretty quickly to that UL. So something that I can do is very quickly in vanilla.js, we will take the only UL that we have in the page. We can add an ID or a class name, and we can say that we are going to add a new li with that message. Okay, so we send the message like this, and maybe something that we can do is also add our own message before in prompt. And because it's our own message, let's put this into a bold HTML so we can make a separation. So now here I will say hi, and if you look there are some nice emojis through CSS there. Hi, how can I see you today? Let me show you. So is it working? Do we have a ChatGPT clone? We'll see. So what if I ask a question such as, do you know something about front-end masters? Let's wait. Front-end Master is an online learning platform, blah, 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 blah. So you know that when you are chatting with ChatGPT, it maintains the context, right? So I can ask another question, say, do you know in which city they are located? Let's wait. I will answer the wait. And it says, I'm sorry, I don't know which city you are referring to. Can you please provide more context or specify which city you are asking about? So what happened here? Actually, on every request, it's losing the previous context. So it doesn't know that we were talking about front-end masters. So let's answer one question at a time. We are waiting. You can see that we are receiving the whole answer at once, not word by word or token by token, as we were used to on ChatGPT. Can we emulate that thing? Yes, it's possible. It's a property called stream. Let me show you the difference here when we were using the terminal. So there is another property that you can apply more properties here. For example, here we can change the temperature. Remember that value between 0 and 1, so I can say 0.5. And I can say a stream. And I can ask for true. By default, it's false. So if I try this stream, in the terminal, let's look at the difference. Instead of giving me one answer at once, it's sending me partial JSONs per word, actually. And it's not now, the text now is not JSON valid. Okay, so it's partial JSONs, mini JSONs over HTTP. You need to actually know how to handle that. Can you do that in JavaScript? Yes, but we are not going to waste time with that because we know that we are not going to do that client side. But there is a way to work with streams, with a buffer stream, with an HTTP stream. So we can read, in this case, slice by slice, okay, chunk by chunk in JavaScript. We need to get rid of the data column and then parse the string as JSON, and we are going to receive basically a delta. Should we say delta somewhere here? Delta. So what's delta is the part of the full message that is coming right now. And then we need to add word by word while the ChatGPT is typing. Okay? But anyway, most of the time, unless you are actually going to make a ChatGPT clone, we don't need a stream. So streaming the content first the answer is longer, because now we have more actually JSON to parse. And most of the time, we don't need that streaming. Okay, so we need the answer. So we don't typically do that. Okay, but that to answer the waiting part. Now, the worst part is that our chat, it's kind of silly. In fact, let me retry so it wasn't just random. I will ask about myself. Who is Maximiliano Firtman? It knows me. So we wait for the full answer, and it's an Argentinian author, trainer, speaker, blah, 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 blah. Where does he live? I'm sorry, I don't have a context. Who are you referring to? So by default, and this is something that for me was a complete surprise when I realized how this works, every request on a chat must include the previous context. We need to do it manually. Server side, OpenAI is not keeping the history that in this LLM world we know as memory. So memory between conversations. So how does it work? We need to do it manually. How? On every new message, we need to add the previous messages as well. Does it make sense? I'm not sure if it makes sense, but that's how it works. In fact, that's how ChatGPT works. Yeah, everybody thinking, well, but sometimes I have very long answers, and then I have a long prompt and long answers. Every time I'm sending a new question, it's sending the previous. Yeah. And you're paying for the tokens again? Yes, you are. That's why at one point, you probably felt that with ChatGPT. ChatGPT is actually lost. So you say, but we were talking about something, you were like right, and now you're hallucinating. That's because it has a limit of tokens. At one point, it's removing the first messages in the chat. Makes sense? That's why GPT-4 has like a bigger window, a larger window of tokens, then it can hold more context. That's how it works today, at least. We don't have any other option. We actually need to do this. So that's why I already have an array of messages, so we can start collecting this. So we actually need to, for example, this role can be just the first message that we have here. Okay, and by the way, we cannot hear your computer answering questions as a pirate or always in Spanish. So, and it will use that, okay, as the system message has power for how it answers, like in a funny way, or in a confident way, or in a short way, or whatever. So what we need to do always, actually, is to send the whole array that we have there, always, and here, what we need is to add this to the array. So messages dot push, and we are going to add that one. So we pass the whole array of messages. In fact, we don't need this. We can just do this in ECMAScript today. And then, this is important, when we receive the answer, we also need to save the whole message. Because if not, it won't have the context of what it answered before. So here, not just the content, but also the role. So let me show you that. So I'm going to also say messages push, and we are going to add JSON.choices sub 0. dot message. That's the whole message, including the role assistant. So let's see if now this works better. So who is Maximiliano Firtman? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, never heard of him. Come on, you are hallucinating. Look at that. That's hallucination. And it's weird. They say, why is hallucinating? You were all witnesses that it knew me. But now it says, never heard of him. But also it's funny. Can you look at that? I bet he's a computer genius. Well, yeah, it's a mix between hallucination and funny. So why hallucination? Well, probably because we didn't set here temperature. And by default, temperature is 0.5. So if you don't want that, send temperature 0. In that case, to the same question, you receive mostly the same answer all the time. Okay? And we can remove the funny part. I don't know if we can keep it or not. You can play with this. So let's do that again. We need a clear button so we can start from the chat. Who is Maximiliano Firtman? Okay, now we are back to the original answer. And where does he live? I mean, the answer it's not that it doesn't have context. It says, I don't know where he lives, but yeah, because the answer is that it knows me. We're talking about myself. We can say, no, something else. Do you know any books written by him? Anyway, you know that it's sending the context, okay? Because even here we can actually check the array of messages. We are accumulating the full chat, okay? And here we have some books, and I think it's true. High performance mobile web, that's fine. Parameter, yep. No, you hallucinate with that one. Oh no, maybe it's the translation because I wrote one in Spanish. And maybe that's the translation. Because I have one that is, it's something like that in Spanish. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry, GPT, for saying that you were a liar. Anyway, so we have our ChatGPT clone, and with this sample, we understood how ChatGPT APIs work. So we need to make API calls all the time, and also we have to send the context all the time. And of course, think about this. Every time you're sending this, you're using more tokens. So this is kind of exponential in terms of how many tokens you will spend. And if you want, the amount of tokens used are coming back in the response. So you can accumulate that and then have some stats. And also, if you go now to the OpenAI website, to your dashboard, you can actually see each call. And you can see how many tokens you have been consuming. We've mentioned this a couple of times, but it's, again, a good idea to do that again. Never store your key in a public place. And also, now we will see how to move to the server, but even when you go to the server, you should control who and how they access your services that are using OpenAI behind the scenes. Because if someone can inject into your prompts, they can then use OpenAI and charge your credit card. Or if you get with a lot of users, you may be out of money easily. And by the way, you can set caps at OpenAI. In fact, I have one on my key. So and you can say, I don't want to spend more than $10 or $1,000. And please send me an email when we are close to $5 or $50. And of course, after that, you are done. Which also means that sometimes when you have users that are asking the same thing, you may want to do caching. So you can cache responses and have your own memory. So maybe you don't want to go all the time to OpenAI if you have people asking the same thing and you already got an answer from OpenAI, you can save it and cache it. So how can we move this to the server? Because we know that this is not good. Well, actually, if you're using Node.js, for example, and you have Node.js 17 or greater, you can just copy and paste the fetch that we have here, like this, from the fetch to response.json, and move that to the server. It's not more difficult than that. So you open, in this case, server.js, and for example, for API chat, you just paste something like that because Node.js now supports the fetch API. So the same code will just work. We just need to set up some things, some quick things, such as, for example, we need to read the body from the request as JSON, like so, and then the OpenAI API, I think I need to update that one because the one that I have on the server, it's an old one. So I will also update the one on the server, like so. And then I need to respond, so with the JSON, and I can just, in this case, wait for the other response. Because we are kind of a proxy at this point. Again, this is not adding any security or anything else. However, I mean, we can do that on the server, but there is a better way. Instead of making your HTTP request manually, you can use the OpenAI API, the OpenAI Node.js API. So when we were in the website, seeing here, for example, how to create the chat completion, here we can change from curl Python to Node.js. So we have here how to set up and import the library, and then how to send a message. So we can just copy and paste that or write it from scratch. And to try it, I will use this other general endpoint that I have here. What's the idea? I do have another, so despite the chat, I have our own playground. So I created our own playground that is pretty simple. It's just a form with a text area, a button, and the idea is that I'm going to call the general API, sending the prompt and expecting the response. So let's see how it looks like. So I'm going to /playground on my local host. It looks like this. In this case, it's not a chat. It's just for testing simple prompts. You don't need context all the time. Sometimes it's I need a translation. I need to translate something to Portuguese. Well, it's just one call. That's all. You don't need context all the time. So in this case, we have this simple playground to play with this. So I just need to do the server part. So then I'm going to server.js. And first, I'm going to paste what I have from the documentation. And first, this is required, so it's importing the library. Then it's setting up the library. By default, it's reading the key from process M. That it's pretty good for deploying this, but we are learning, so we are actually making this simpler. We are just importing the OpenAI. By the way, I have a typo here. It's AI key, like so. And then we create the OpenAI object. And then the idea is that we use that object, in this case, when we receive a post request to API general. And what we need to change here is we need to read the body that we are receiving. So the body, this is Express.js, nothing really fancy. And here we have the messages. So instead of using this for the content, remember that in this case we are not going to create a chat, so we are not going to send previous past history. But because we are using the OpenAI ChatGPT chat version, we still need to send like a chat message, like role user, even if it's just one. And for the content, we are going to use body.prompt. Why it's called .prompt? Because from app.js, we are passing an object with a property name as prompt. It's just that. So we are passing the prompt, and instead of doing console log of the message, what I need is to respond to the client that message. I'm going to respond as a JSON for completion, blah, blah, blah. I think that's OK. So coming back here, Let's see if that worked. If I say hi, send, I received an object on the other side. Why? Because I'm sending the message. The message contains the role and the content inside. If I just want the content, I say .content. So let's try again. Hi. Hi there. How can I assist you today? So now, client side, I don't have the key. Anyway, I'm still having a security risk because anyone can call my API. So you need to set limits, or you need to create your own token. Maybe the user needs to be logged in, and you set limits per user because remember, you're going to pay for every request. But now we have a nice internal playground that works server side where we can try different things. Remember that you can use this for doing a lot of steps, a lot of tasks with the API. So the next topic where we will finally understand how ChatGPT works is known as prompt engineering. The definition is the process of designing and refining prompts or inputs for language models like GPT to generate desired outputs or responses. So that's the idea. I like to say this is more prompt hacking than engineering. That's why I don't like the term prompt engineering. It's kind of the buzzword of the moment. There are people, experts on AI, selling books, and yeah, but it's more hacking than engineering. Also because it's really dependent on the model. The day they change the model, the tips that they're giving you are not useful anymore. It happened a lot with DALL-E, with Midjourney, where on every new version, the prompt engineering ideas were not useful anymore, right? But the idea is that understanding how we can set a better prompt to get a better answer, okay? That's the idea. The more explicit and large the prompt, more accurate the results we can get from GPT. Also, more tokens you're spending, okay? But that's another thing. But the idea is that when GPT has more content, remember that this has to do with statistics. So actually, it tries to detect, it's trying to think about what's the next word. And if it has more context, it can get better results. Remember, that's the idea. We have a prompt, and it goes to GPT, and then we get the result. And as we mentioned before, ChatGPT plugins are not actually injecting new data to the black box. They're injecting the prompt. So we are always injecting the prompt. To send the chat history, we are injecting in the prompt the chat history. Everything is about the prompt. We never touch the GPT model. It's a black box. As of today, it's a black box. The only thing that we can touch is the prompt. Even plugins on ChatGPT, they're just changing the prompt. So now, I'm not going to give you, there are people saying, I have a super prompt. There are people selling prompts. I saw that. So I'm not going to give you here super prompts to get your life easier, to make money with ChatGPT. Now I'm going to give you hints like targeting developers, web and app developers. So hints that will help us get better results. We want consistent and deterministic outputs. So if we are asking A and the answer is B, we want the same answer on every call. Okay, so that's kind of the deal. Sometimes we need the output in specific formats for processing. So because we are not going to use ChatGPT for manual process. We want to use ChatGPT to integrate that directly with an algorithm, with a database, to automate things. And if I need the JSON with one structure, I need the JSON always on that structure. So ChatGPT cannot create its own properties or hallucinate about how a JSON looks like. We are paying for the API, so we need to reduce abuse as well. And also, we want to validate that the user-generated content that goes into the prompt is valid. For example, this can be just some bad actor trying to inject the prompt. But let's say you have a translation service. You want to translate code from Java to JavaScript, whatever. That's your service. So you have a text box where users will type Java code, and you will use ChatGPT to get that code into JavaScript. What happens if the user is pasting whatever, the Bible? It's not code. So have you ever think about that? What will happen if we send the Bible? So what will happen with the output? So we need to think about that. And how? The prompt. We will see that in a minute. And also we want to stop prompt injection. So we need to, again, we cannot automate that because bad actors will always find a way to go over our rules. Well, we need to tell GPT, we need to tell the model what to do in case the input is not following the rules that I want. Does it make sense? Everything has to do with prompt engineering, to working with the prompt. So we always need to remember that LLMs can hallucinate, making facts and presenting them in a convincing way. Just have that in mind always, right? To reduce hallucination, there are some basic rules that we can follow when we are writing the prompt. And also, we should use the temperature as 0. Remember, the temperature is a property that we set. For example, in our server, we didn't set that one. So when we got here, we can add the property temperature. And we can set it to 0, and that means a deterministic output. If you set 1, it will hallucinate. It will be imaginative in their responses. But we don't want that, so we want temperature 0. Let's talk about some basic rules for the prompt. We should write specific and clear instructions. Really clear instructions. Like, you are a web developer and you're writing a web page for the government. Now, write a table in HTML that contains headers and cells, and each row will have blah, blah, blah. You need to be very specific to get a better answer. For large tasks, you can provide the model a list of steps. So you can help the model think with you. Okay? So, for example, you have a text and you want to summarize the text, convert the text into French, and then create a list of emojis that will get the feeling of that text. Just for say something. Well, instead of saying, hey, I want this text in French with emojis and summarize, you can say, hey, you are a text processor that will do this. First, you will translate the text into French. Second, you will do that. And then, lastly, you will do the other thing. So we can help the model think. And that will get a better result. And sometimes, it's even better to make several GTP calls. So in this case, we do a step by step, and always providing the previous context. For example, and sometimes this is even the only way to do some things. For example, you have a book, and you want to summarize the book. You cannot pass the whole book. So something that you can do is you can pass chapter by chapter and ask for a summary of each chapter. When you get the array of summaries, you make a final call saying, summarize the book. Okay? So you make things step by step. Yeah, you will pay for every step, but that's how you get better results. Also, you should use internally an iterative process to find the right prompt. So when try to different prompts, try to change the words. Sometimes, for example, instead of summarize, you can use extract the data you want. Or you can say, instead of summarize, you can say, summarize this, paying attention to that. So adding more words can improve a lot the kind of answer that you're getting. For example, to be more specific and to give clear instructions, you should use delimiters for dynamic data. For example, you say, I want you to translate this text. Well, how are you going to render the text? How are you going to say which is the text? Well, you can use tags as in XML. So you open tag text. You put the text, you close the text. You don't need to explain to the model what's a tag. So, but it will recognize that that's a different section. You can use triple backtick. This is coming like from Markdown. Triple quotes works as well. Triple hyphen works as well to separate sections. So what's the question? What's the text that you are asking question from? You can even explain the model. So you can say, I want to translate the text in triple backtick. Then you can add more instructions and then the triple backticks with the text. Okay, makes sense? So you can try this in our, like here, like translate the text, let's say, the text within a tag to French, and then summarize it. Then make a summary of the most, or make a list. Look at this. Make a list with a bullet in different lines of the most important topics. And I will go to, this is Learn PWA. It's some kind of a free book that I authored with the Chrome team, in case you want to learn about progressive web apps. So I can just take a piece of text. I will come here and say, well, we said a tag, so let's open a tag text. And I paste this. That's my input. So send. And let's wait for it. So, well, it's French, so I don't know. But I guess it's talking about PWA and something. I don't know French. Sorry. Also, we can ask for data in a structured format. So I can really ask the model to use JSON, HTML, comma-separated values. Any format you need if it's string-based. And we are going to do an example that works, and you will see that that's true. So I can ask even for the answer, this answer. Go back here. Let's change this with a different prompt. For example, give me a list of 10 random countries. Okay? If you look at that prompt, I'm not being really specific. I'm not explaining, okay, which countries, how to see the answer. I mean, I have a list, but yeah, I can say, give me the list should be in CSV format. So send. Because I'm not sending the context, I shouldn't get the same answer. By the way, I should clean the previous answer. So let's do that. So in Playground app.js, we should clean the output every time we make a new query. I think that will be better. So you can see at the bottom anyway. But if you look there, it says the CSV format is as follows. And it says, well, if I want to parse this, I don't like it. So, and I don't like the CSV format is as is. So I can say, just reply with the CSV content, no other words. So I'm very clear, very specific of what I want. So now I don't have any other explanation before or after. And instead of CSV, I can use an HTML UL table. Just reply no with the HTML content, and it should be in HTML format with a table. Or I can use an unordered list. And now I have a table. But the table has a header, a TH with a country. I didn't ask for that. But I wasn't specific enough. And maybe I try again and I get a different, well, I can say with a table without a header, or with a header, or with a class name. So the more specific you are, the better results you get. And this idea of give me just the content, no other words, it's pretty cool to then parse the response. So as you can see, this is what is known as prompt engineering, in this case for developers. It's just playing with the words so the model will understand us better. So that's why I say it's more prompt hacking. So what else do we have here? Give the model an example of what you're expecting. So if you have your own format, you can actually say that. And you can explain to the model what to do when the input is invalid. This is really cool. Let me show you that. And we're going to use that later. But let's say that I will say, give me the list of countries for the cities in triple backtick. So I will say here a list of cities. Let's say Minneapolis, Buenos Aires, that's my hometown, London, Tokyo, something like that. And then we can say the list should be using a format like, and I'm going to invent something. I will use a different delimiter here. It's a different way to separate this. I will say like, let's say we can use Madrid, colon, Spain, semicolon. And I use Bangkok, colon, Thailand. So I'm giving the model a sample of what I'm expecting. The more concrete you are, the clearer you are when you're explaining, the better results you will get. I'm not sure, I haven't tried that one, so let's see that. What do you think? It worked. But now that I'm seeing the answer, that it looks pretty good. I can also add things like, okay, give me the emoji of the flag emoji. It really works. So add me the emoji, so I can add. Even I don't want to explain that. I'm going to just add the emoji for Spain and for Thailand, and see if that works. But if you pay attention, I'm receiving a last dot. Look at the emojis. It worked. It realized that I was expecting the emoji of the country, so it's actually pretty cool that you can actually get this. But I'm getting the last column, the last dot, sorry, that might be problematic for parsing this. So then I realized that testing the prompt. So then I can say, don't add any other characters or symbols to the list. And see if that works. By the way, I haven't tried this. This is a problem I'm doing live with you. So, and if it doesn't work, then you can say remove the dot or something like that. I don't have a dot now. So it worked. So that's prompt engineering. And that's why it's cool to work with a playground. So you can play and then you say, okay, I'm done with this. So I will copy and save that in my app. So that's the prompt I will use. But what if, remember this is asking for cities and countries. But let's say that the list of cities is dynamically generated, it's coming from a database, or the worst part, is written by the user. What if I say iPhone, Android, and MacBook? Because if it's user-generated, I don't know what will happen. Let's see. Well, sorry, I cannot provide it of countries, which it's okay, but I cannot parse that. So I should add here instructions to what to do. If the list of cities does contain valid entries, respond with the string false. And let's use something like this, with no other characters or symbols. Okay, makes sense? So if I hit send, false. So now we can parse that. We can parse the false with JavaScript or with other language and know that something was wrong with the input. We don't have cities. We can go back to the list of cities. Let's say Sao Paulo, Sydney, and Casablanca. Send. And we can see if this is still working. Pretty good. That's prompt engineering for web developers. Yeah, we have a large prompt, and we are going to pay for that prompt every time. But that's how GPT works. It's part of the deal. OK? Cool. I'm going to save that for later usage, just in case. OK, let's go back here. So remember, as you see there, prompt is king here. Everything is about the prompt. Capabilities that you can do with the prompt: ask for summaries, inferring things like ask for the sentiment, for example, or relevant data or tags. So let me show you one example of that. So give me, so with the sentence in triple quotes, infer if the sentence is positive or not, answering with the words or with the letters P or N, let's say, or negative here, without any other character. And now I can pass a quote, like, I hate this course. So send N, negative. I like this course, P. So that's inferring, and you can use that to check what the user is typing, what the user is saying, and even, look at this, instead of that, select or pick one emoji related to the phrase. Okay? So I like this course. Let's see the emoji. It's that one. I hate this course. That's emoji, but anyway. It rains outside. That's emoji. Can you see the emoji there? So this is pretty good for doing these things, right? So you can, these are different ideas that you can use with prompting. And by the way, this is probably one token. So that's a cheap prompt, at least in the answer. OK, so that's inferring, actually. You can also transform data, translations, format conversion, extract data, like you have a text, and try to extract the numbers or the emails or the amount of wherever that you expect the text to have. Create context, expand on a fact. So you have a fact and you can explain, well, write me an article as if you are in the New York Times or in the style of Shakespeare about blah, blah. Okay, so that's prompt engineering. Now it's time for our last live sample. And I promise you to work with an app. So I will keep my server up and running as it is right now. And I'm opening a new window, a new VS Code window. And I'm going to open another app that is the one that you have as cooking masters. This app is separate just to show you that in this case it's going to use my web service. It can be in a different server, different domain, completely different. In fact, it doesn't contain a Node.js server, so I can use, in this case, I'm going to use a plugin that I have in VS Code. It's an extension for a web server. So I'm going to use a server on this is live server. That's the one I'm using. I'm going to open a server on a different port. So now I have this app in one port and the other app there. This app is known as Cooking Masters. The idea of the app is to help us while we're cooking. The idea is that I want to cook fish tacos with pickled onion. I click here. I can see the ingredients, and I can start cooking. So I can go step by step with the cook process. While I'm cooking, I'm looking at my app. I can add timers like that, different timers while we're cooking. So that's an app. It's a web app. It's pretty simple. It's an app. All the data, the recipes are coming from a JSON file, or it can be a database. But how to integrate this with artificial intelligence? how to integrate this with ChatGPT. Well, here you have an idea. What if I can enter here a list of ingredients that I have at home? I have tomato, I have eggs, I have chicken, butter, bread, carrots, and I get a recipe with AI. That sounds interesting. And not just the recipe. I can ask OpenAI to create a photo of that recipe like that one. That's the goal. Can we achieve that? And with the same structure, so we can inject that recipe in the system, and it will work as if it's a recipe coming from our own database. So all the client-side part is already there, waiting for us to finish the server part. So if we'll look here at scripts, app.js, there is a place where we can see that it's taking the ingredients from the text area, and it's going to localhost 3000 API recipe. So we need to go to our server with OpenAI, implement that. And then after we got the recipe, it will ask for an image. And how the image works? The image works with a prompt. So you have played with creating images with AI. So you create a prompt. In this case, the prompt will be a high-quality photograph of the meal and the name of the recipe and the description of the recipe that was actually created by the AI, by GPT. Okay, so GPT will create actually the prompt for the image creation. So what we need to do is go and create then the server. So I'm going back to the other project, and in our server, we need to work with that. Well, first, do we need to see something new? Well, the image part. The image part is new. We haven't used that API before. But for the recipe, it's just the same thing. The only important part is to work with the prompt. So what I need is to work with the prompt. I need a good prompt so I can get a recipe in the format that I'm expecting. In fact, what's the format that I'm expecting? Let's look at the other recipes available in the data folder. So this is how it looks like. It's a JSON that has a slug, that's for the router, the URL, a name, a type, a duration in minutes, an image, a description, the list of ingredients in this particular format, and there's steps, that is an array with name, description, and some steps, they have a timer because it's saying, for example, here, I want to do something for 30 minutes, and it has a timer of 30. Can we make GPT to create something like this from a list of random ingredients? That's the challenge. Okay, so I'm going to copy one of these objects because we can use that as a sample in our prompt. Okay, so I'm going to copy that just to have here somewhere. I will create a constant for the recipe sample. Okay, I will copy that. And that's okay. Yeah, it's okay. I can just minimize that one. I can collapse that one. Okay, so how to do that? Well, actually, it will be the same as the general thing. The only thing that we are going to work is with the content that is not body.prompt. We are going to get from the body probably the list of ingredients. In fact, let's check if that's the case. So I'm going to app.js again, and I'm sending here to the first request the list of ingredients. Okay, so it's ingredients is the key of the JSON object. So I'm going back here and say this is ingredients. I have a typo, ingredients, like so. And now what I need is to create the prompt. And this is going to be probably a large prompt. So I will say that we'll create the prompt. I will use a backtick so I can be multi-line, like that. Well, first we can go to our playground and play first there to see if we get that, or just be confident enough and try a prompt directly, right? So first, we need to pass some data, or we need to pass specific instructions, and also we could add here a role for the system. Remember, in our chat system, we can pass a role. The role is who you are or who the GPT model should be. Okay, so we can say that you are a cooking expert that creates recipes or healthy recipes or whatever, vegan recipes, wherever you want to add. So and then we have the prompt, and the prompt is, for example, create a recipe with the list of ingredients defined in the markup, and then we can put ingredients. We create a markup. Again, we don't need to explain the markup. The model will understand that and put the ingredients that we are receiving like that there. And then we can also say, again, the more specific you are, the better. You can include typical ingredients found in a kitchen, such as say salt, pepper, condiments, because yeah, the user probably will never say I have salt. What else? We need to remember we have here ingredients. That's an input from the user. We need to be very careful with that because the user might be saying anything. They even can be trying to inject the prompt and say, forget about everything that was said before. Now I want you to do X and Y. But also we need to do something like this. If the ingredients is empty, or if the list of ingredients is empty, or you can find ingredients inside, just answer with false without any other character. So if the list of ingredients is empty, or I have a typo here. By the way, what happens if I left off? That is wrong. The model will probably get it anyway. I mean, we should do it better. But actually, if we have a typo, most of the time GPT will recognize what you meant anyway. In fact, there are people researching right now as we speak in a way to save tokens. How? They found a way that these models are pretty good to understanding compressed text. Like for example, if you write the text without vowels, or if you compress the words, they understand you anyway. So there are people playing with prompt compression algorithms to save you money. That makes sense. That's wild. Anyway, and also I have another typo here. But I think that's a brain typo because ingredients in Spanish, and I speak Spanish, is ingredientes. That's the E that I'm not sure if it's the auto-completion or it's my brain. But anyway, so we were making sure that if the list of ingredients that we are passing is not good enough or is not a list of ingredients, we want just false. We don't want a value, right? So what else? If you have found a recipe, send the output in JSON format as the following sample in triple quotes. And then I use triple quotes and I pass the sample that was called recipe sample. I can add more instructions. The more instructions you add, the better results you will get. By the way, because I'm using also a template string, I may want to change this maybe in 3 asterisks, just because it's JavaScript and it will complain. I need to escape those characters. I can use double quotes, triple double quotes. So okay, we can try with that and see what happens. So that's the prompt. I'm sending the prompt as content. You can see this is large and the answer might take some time. So maybe 30 seconds. So we need to be patient here. We can try here and do console log of the prompt if you want to see it, at least the first time in the console. And also, we may want to see the answer in the console. We don't need to, but just in case. Like so. OK. And then we need the image side. And this is using the DALL-E API, the image creation API. So let's go to the documentation, the API reference, and we're going to look for images. And here we can just take the example on Node.js. We already have all the declaration. We just need to copy this. Something like that. You can see it's a response, a waiting for, a cute baby, see other, but no. First, the size. We can make it smaller because we don't need that big. And then what we need is to get the prompt that we are sending from the app. So similar to what we have done before, we are going to get, let's see first what's going on here. So we're going to say the body is from the request, the body. The prompt, it's actually body.prompt. And we can send, and one, this is the, if you look at the API, let's go back here. The end is the number of images to generate. I don't want 2, I want 1. Because we are not going to see them manually. So, OK, let's cross our fingers and send the image directly to the user. And finally, what we're going to receive is not actually the image. So it's not the image bytes. We're going to receive the URL. So we're going to respond back to the client, back to the frontend, a JSON with the URL taken from the response. But the response is .data sub0.url. How do I know that? It should be in the sample somewhere more down, because that's how you get into the URL, like that. So you get the data. I think that should be good. OK, so the only difference that we are changing the function name, that behind the scenes, what's going on here is that it's changing the endpoint and the arguments, and that's all. So the library is just changing the endpoint and making a normal HTTP request. Well, before testing this, we need to solve 2 bugs that we have. First, in our prompt, we are passing the list of ingredients, but that's actually an object because it's JSON. So because this is a string, we should stringify the list of ingredients. And also, it's not request.ingredients, it's body.ingredients. And also, we need to do something similar, stringify the recipe, because the recipe is also an object. So I'm going to stringify the recipe sample. And now we are ready to test this. So back in our Cooking Masters application, I will type a list of ingredients that I have, just as chicken, avocado, bread, butter, and eggs. And I will get a recipe with AI. And now our AI chef is working. This will take some seconds, because actually it's going to GPT first to get the recipe. And after that, it's going to grab the image from DALL-E. And finally, we have a beautiful chicken avocado sandwich that has its own image. And you can see it's part of the same data structure. So it's actually the UI. It's getting the right name, type, ingredients, the amount of minutes that it takes, and I can get in. And I can see the ingredients. And I can start cooking my chicken avocado sandwich. It's 4 steps. And I can go one by one. So we've actually got an structured data that was invented by the artificial intelligence based on an user input. So if you ask me, I think this is kind of magic, that you can give more context to the prompt. And that's how you do that. So if you want to create a chat in your own website that answers questions from your frequently asked questions, well, you need to pass to GPT your frequently asked question, and then the user's question. Does it make sense? And you need to explain. You will answer only from this set of questions. Things like that. That's how it's done. But is there any other way? So because we cannot fine-tune LLMs, such as ChatGPT, we need to go back to the prompt. But if you want to connect GPT to our data, our databases, or our PDF files, the magic happens in the context. And we know that we need to pass a lot of information in this chat format that we have. Typically, we pass that in the system message. Remember that we have a dialogue, and we can pass a system, you are this and that. Well, there you can add all the information, all the context that you want to provide. The problem is that sometimes the context is too large. GPT doesn't have memory, so we have to inject the prompt on every call, which is costly first, and seems like a problem, right? So for large databases and documents, there is a design pattern to split the data and do a search outside of the model before the prompt. Let me explain how that works. For example, we can connect GPT with our own data for a chatbot that can answer questions locally, to search, transform, summarize our own data. Or something that is kind of a use case that we see lately a lot is chat with a PDF, chat with a video. So you can chat with this video you are watching right now. In this case, we use the caption, because we need to use text for now, the captions of my voice speaking, and we can put this into this process that I will explain in a minute. And then you can chat with, I don't know, some kind of myself in the metaverse of GPT, at least in this video. So how does it work? The idea is that if you have an idea of what you're looking for, you first search. So for example, someone is asking about how to make, from this video, how to make a ChatGPT plugin. Okay, so you know that it has to do with ChatGPT plugin. And I haven't mentioned ChatGPT plugin in the last hour. So we know that it's not in that part. But there is a part of the video where we mention that. So we search that. We can search in a normal database, in files, or a data collection. And then you pass the result, just the piece, the chunk of text of that part of the video to ChatGPT as a context. I know, it's still weird. But sometimes it's even not simple to understand where in the whole document we have the answer for the user. It's difficult just by searching by keyword. It's not so simple. For example, if you ask me about GPT, I mentioned GPT over the whole video 1,000 times. So then you will pass the whole video text? No. We have another solution for that. And that solution is called embeddings. And we use a different kind of database for that. That OpenAI is not helping you with that part. So because this is an OpenAI and ChatGPT course, I will give you some hints on where to look for these APIs, but we won't cover that today. So vector-based databases. It lets you store and index high-dimensional vector representing text data, allowing for efficient similarity search and retrieval of documents of phrases based on their embedding representations. So what? First, before trying to understand that concept, let's go back and try to understand what's an embedding. It's a method of converting text into numerical vectors, enabling efficient processing and comparison of text data learned through training neural network models on large amount of text data. It's still weird to understand. So what's the idea? We will take a text, a chunk of text, for example, my last 10 minutes of speech, and we can send that to OpenAI, not to the GPT model, to a different API that is called Embeddings. In return, OpenAI will give us an array of numbers. The array of numbers, that's an embedding, represents the text and the semantic relationship of the text with other words. It's difficult to understand, actually. But the idea is that we store that in a database. But it's not a normal database. It's a vector-based database. So that vector-based database will let us then make semantic search. So then when we have the question from the user, we can find exactly which vector is more semantically related to that question. The representation looks like a dense vector of real numbers. It's actually an array of numbers, a large array of numbers. And because it's number, it's also fast to process for many algorithms. For example, a word embedding the word cat might look like an array of 0.2, 0.5, minus, blah, 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 blah. Typically, we are talking about really large numbers and infinite numbers when you're looking at them. So, and that's why we needed a special database for that. So the method to work with this is known as split and embed. So we're going to split our document in slices, in chunks. By any character length, you pick one. 1,000 characters, 1,500. Even, in fact, you can play with different numbers and see which one works better. It doesn't need to be a semantic cut. So you can cut anywhere. Well, here, from here for here. That's a slice. Okay? It can be a PDF, videos, caption, frequently asked questions, whatever document, large document you have. It can be even also like an output from a classic database with all your customers, with all your products, with prices. So you just cut it in slices, in chunks. Sometimes you even overlap a little bit, like 10% of the slice, so the next slice also contains the last 10% of the previous one. We convert each slice into its embedded representation. How? We pay OpenAI for that. We make a request. You do that once only. We make a request to the OpenAI API for embeddings. That's a different API from the ones that we have been using. And in return, GPT will give us the vector representation, the embedding of that chunk. Then, with that, we store the embeddings in a vector database that you need to install, you need to use, or you can use from the cloud. There are a lot of cloud-based solutions that will solve you that problem. And it's just numbers. It's numbers, okay? So we do that when we want to create our database. But then the user is asking questions. So when we need a prompt, and we need the prompt to answer the question from our data, we search in the vector database based on what the user needs. The database will return the slice, the chunk of the information that is closer semantically to the query. And that's the power of embeddings. Then we inject that chunk of information, that slice, as the context of the prompt. We go back to the idea of filling the context, right? Prompt engineering. We are injecting that slice of information that is semantically close to the query into the prompt. This is how it looks like in a diagram. So we have a user's prompt. We have our app. It's a server-side app, for example. We have a vector database in our server or in the cloud. And then we have the OpenAI APIs. So this is how it works. We receive the user's prompt. It's a query. It's a question. And then our app will take the prompt and talk to the OpenAI Embeddings API. I say, I have this question from the user. The question is, what's the price of the OpenAI? So what's the price of a token? That's something that I said at the beginning of the course. So OpenAI doesn't know about that, but it receives the string and it returns me the embedding of that question. numbers, statistical numbers, just numbers. We then go with those embeddings to our vector database and say, hey, I have this embedding. Find me the chunk that is semantically closer to that embedding. And your vector database will give you the slice of relevant information, the chunk of strings, the 1,000 characters where I was talking about the price. And then with that, you will add that as a context of the user's prompt, and I'm making a final query to the GPT API. And that will give me the output that I send to the user. That's the process today to create a chatbot that will answer questions about a lot of things that you have in your system, to documentation. For example, if you have a documentation of your API or if your app, you have a big manual of how something works. It can be documentation about a product that you are selling. I'm selling laptops and I have a manual. Well, how can I make a chatbot that can answer questions about the manual? Well, you split the manual in chunks. You create the embeddings of those of each chunk. You store that in a vector database, and when there is a question, you do that process. That's how embedding works. It's a lot of work, yeah. I know that as you as developer are expecting something simpler. Even a lot of people is expecting actually fine-tuning ChatGPT, but that's not possible with that model as of today, and I don't think it's the idea. So you can still fine-tune, and you pay for that as well on OpenAI, previous models, not ChatGPT. But for ChatGPT, everything has to do with the prompt. If you want to get further into this, I encourage you to learn about Langchain. Langchain is a framework for developing applications powered by LLMs, and Langchain has libraries for Python and Node.js and JavaScript. And it's multi-vendor, so it's not just for OpenAI. You can connect also with other models, other AI models. It includes prompt tools. So the prompt, the string, it has a lot of places there. So you can create templates. So you can say, well, here it will go the example. This is what I need if something's wrong. It includes, this is the part where you can use embeddings. It includes document loaders. So you can upload a PDF with this, and it will do the chunk part. It will slice your document, and it will store your vectors. It also includes text splitters that will split your document in chunks. By the way, Langchain will use your OpenAI key because they're not doing that for you. They have memory, so they support the idea of memory between calls. So instead of using directly the OpenAI API as we were using, you can use Langchain, and then Langchain will have memory and will remember the history chat, and it will inject that into the prompt for all their requests. And the name Lang from LLMs, language models, and chain. Chain, it's an interface included in this library that will let you connect different AI calls. So you can say, I want to make this call, then DALL-E. Then after DALL-E, I want to go to another model, then I want to use ChatGPT for something else, and you can express all that chain and then execute the chain. And finally, it includes an idea known as agents. An agent is to make decisions on actions to take based on GPT. Then the agent will take the action. It can be send an email. It can be call an API, copy a folder. It can be something on your computer, open a software, use the software, click here or there, and it can even observe for that action to control that it happened or not, and it will retry. And for that, it uses a lot of calls to OpenAI's APIs. So that's Langchain. The website is js.langchain.com. That's the one that goes directly to the JavaScript API. And here you have all the documentation on how to start using LLMs. And here you can see how to use the chat models from OpenAI and other providers in the future, how to, all the tools for prompts. So output parser, for example, it will check that the format that the LLM is returning is exactly the one you were expecting. So it's a validator of the output. Indexes is where you have document loaders, vector stores that will help you with that part, to split the document and then create the embeddings for you. So Langchain is like the next step. So after you learn the basics of OpenAI, the next step is probably use a framework such as Langchain. We've seen how AI works with web development. So we don't just use ChatGPT as a normal user. We are web developers. We've seen how to integrate that into our websites. We've seen how we can provide information to ChatGPT through a ChatGPT plugin. Remember that at the end, it's just injecting data into the prompt. That's what the ChatGPT plugin does. We've covered the idea of prompt engineering. I prefer to say prompt hacking. But anyway, we've seen that making a clear prompt with really strict instructions of what you're expecting really gives you good outputs. And also working with the temperature is important for us, for developers. Temperature 0 will not guarantee, but will try to always get a consistent result. And finally, we discussed ways that we have today to actually work with your own data. We see how you can integrate ChatGPT with your own databases, documents, and any media file that you have right now in your website or your app. Just have in mind, there is no way to fine-tune ChatGPT. It's always about the prompt. So prompt is king. So that's all I have here for you. So I hope that you now understand how this looks like and you are excited about what you can do. I think that the recipe example that creates images and recipes in a structured data format, it's really cool. It's like magic. Okay, so actually I'm really excited about what you can do now that you know how to integrate ChatGPT into the platform. And I hope that you can show us on social networks, I'm Firt on Twitter or Frontend Masters, what you are going to do with ChatGPT and your websites and web apps. Thank you.